And I'll send all my loving to you.
When the Beatles touched down in New York on February 7th, 1964, few knew that American music and culture would change forever. Few, except for maybe their fans.
3,000 screaming teenagers are at New York's Kennedy Airport to greet, you guessed it, the Beatles. Some music critics call their harmony unmistakably diatonic. Others say it's pandiatomic. Parents say it's just plain pandemonium.
Beatlemania was already raging in Britain, but the Beatles were just being introduced to America.
Paul, Ringo, George, John. Can we have the last John.
The Beatles had formed their band not in posh London, but in the working-class city of Liverpool, where they grew up in a culture of irreverent humor that Brits call cheek.
Their first meeting with the American press brings forth an interview laced with quips and humor.
What about all this talk that you represent some kind of a social rebellion?
It's a dirty lie.
By the time they arrived in the U.S., they were already very well schooled in how to behave.
Beatles scholar Ken Womack is the Penn State University laureate and editor of the Cambridge Companion to the Beatles. He says the Beatles had been under the media microscope for a year in Great Britain and were ready for facing the American press.
When they were interviewed in the Pan Am Lounge, in that famous moment when the reporters pummeled them with questions, they very quickly morphed into showbiz mode, answering so sardonically those questions.
You hope to get a haircut at all? No, thanks. I had one yesterday.
Something has happened in the motorcade route. There's numerous...
The Beatles arrived in a country still mourning the loss of President John F. Kennedy, assassinated just months before. Americans were ready for something that would lighten the somber mood. The Beatles delivered some levity and joy.
With their music, with their very presence, their humor, their wit, their good looks, everything about them helped the United States emerge from that period of mourning and really touch off the 60s as we think of them. Here's one of my favorites.
James Rosen is senior Washington correspondent for Fox News and an avid Beatles fan who has written about the band for the Washington Post.
It was like a signal was sent up to teenagers across the country and across the world that it was okay to let it all hang out.
Come on, come on, come on, come on.
The Beatles were a force for freedom, culturally, politically, in fashion sense, with their hair, the way they spoke their minds. And that's why they were so revolutionary, and that's why they caught on so big.
The Beatles had come to America to appear on the Ed Sullivan TV show, and over 70 million people tuned in that Sunday night. It was the largest TV audience ever for an entertainment show.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles, bring them on!
Close your eyes and I'll miss you.
Soon, the band had the top 5 hits in the country. Hits that kept coming, says Ray McDonald, who hosts VOA's Top 20 Countdown.
You had a lot of teenage girls and boys who just found the Beatles to be tremendously exciting, maybe a little dangerous.
So please, love me do.
They look like someone you could take home to meet your mother, but on further inspection, you probably shouldn't.
They looked different and they dressed different. They had this supercharged take on American R&B, definitely different from what their parents listened to, so that automatically made them great.
Pump it up.
All right.
Now the Beatles are listened to by kids and parents alike.
Everybody knows the Beatles. They're folkloric figures. So it's a multi-generational thing.
I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand.
Eleanor Rigby picks up the rice in the church where the wedding has been.
We all live in the yellow submarine.
Today, 50 years later, the Beatles are a kind of permanent fact of modern life. Not only in the United States or even in the Western world, but around the world. The reason for that is they were the best.
For VOA News, I'm Laurel Bowman.